Okay folks, what I've got going on at the homestead here today is I'm going to can up a bunch of chicken and I'm going to videotape the process so I can show you how to do it in a safe and simple manner. Now when canning pickles or tomatoes that have a high acid content, items like that can be safely canned with a hot water bath, but when doing any form of meat it must always be canned with a pressure canner. You need the high heat and pressure from the pressure canning process to kill off all forms of harmful bacteria such as botulism. Occasionally you might hear someone say that they can meat in a hot water bath, but I would never do it myself and I would certainly not recommend it. Now having some knowledge of canning will enable a person to preserve large quantities of food even when they have little to no means of refrigeration. And I think that's a very, very important thing for a person to know if they're planning to live off the grid or have a self-sufficient homestead. So let's get started. Most of these birds here, this is premium young chicken. It's all natural, minimally processed. I don't get the ones that have all kinds of solutions and crap like that. But here we got nice natural chicken, and they average about $4.50 a piece. This one was $4.48. This one here is $4.65, $4.99, $4.71. So these are nice chickens here, and not a big investment. But if you have ample freezer space, of course, there's nothing more handy than that. But for the off-grid homestead, you definitely got to find ways to preserving meat, and canning is a great way to go about the process. Now when you're cutting your meat, you want to always do it on a plastic cutting board. I really don't recommend using a wooden board for that. You don't want to have raw meat juices get embedded in that wood. And these are much easier to sanitize. So I'm going to do a few chickens at a time here. I'm going to take the wings off, and I'm going to grab the wing there. You can feel the knuckle in there. And I just work my knife right in through there, nice and clean. Because I think wings now in the store are fairly expensive. I think they're at least $1.99 a pound or more. So I'm going to have a nice batch of wings there, and I paid 95 cents a pound for these chickens. Now I prefer to buy the whole chickens like this. I get my better buy that way. Certainly none of it's going to go to waste. I'm going to go ahead and take the thighs and wings off because that's my favorite part. And I'm going to can the rest. And then the carcasses, I'm going to throw them in the freezer, probably 3 to a bag, and then take them out and make chicken soup with those later on. But for the time being, we're just going to go ahead and cut these up. Now I'm certainly not a professional meat cutter, not by any stretch of the imagination. So if someone's watching this and you are a meat cutter, you probably know a heck of a lot better way to go about it. I just do it the best that I can, and this is what works for me. And that's what I'm showing. I'm not trying to tell you this is how you cut meat. This is just how I go through the process, just like I did with my venison video. Okay? I know there's probably much better ways to go about it. I've never been shown how to cut meat. I've just been clean and game all my life. So the way I do it works for me, and I'm just showing you how to do it. Anyway, this is not a meat cutting video. It's how to can chicken. So I'm going to go keep on plugging away here. Now if you get in there cutting and you're chopping, struggling, you're just not in the right spot. You can just wiggle it around. See, I wiggled that and I found the right spot. Got a nice clean cut right there. A few more wings for the Bobby. Yeah, I'm going to cut right in. And then just working my way. See that? I lifted that leg a little bit, found the right spot. Beautiful. Here we go again. Right in there. And lift that leg. You're going to find that right spot. When you lift the leg like that, it puts that knife right in the groove, right in the right spot. Piece of cake. So why pay a butcher the extra $1 a pound, right, to do this stuff? So. You just want to have a sharp knife. You don't want to be in there messing around with a dull knife. You're going to hurt yourself. Now, if you're in there with your knife and you're just like getting a dead end and you're struggling, your knife is just not in the right spot. So sometimes just raising the leg or the wing like that will feed the knife right into that groove. Now here on the legs, I'll cut into the groove like that, flip the bird upside down, and right along, I'm following that backbone. I just lift the leg right like that. It puts the knife right in the crease, and that cut, and it was effortless. I'm going to do that again. Just cut in the crease, get my knife started, lift that leg up, and again, it's right through there, effortless. Okay, piece of cake. Now for the breast. I have that center seam there where the cartilage is. I work my blade right along the side of that cartilage, breastbone, or whatever you might want to call it. And then I just follow. I follow the breastbone with my knife there. Now the rest of the carcass still has plenty of meat on it. You can get in there with a knife and pull all the little pieces of meat off the bone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and freeze these as they are, and this is going to make some really good soup stock for later on. And continue the process on the rest of these birds. Okay, I got my chickens all cut up here. Before I start cooking them, I wanted to show you something here. I have 11.5 pounds of boneless chicken breast, 10.5 pounds of leg quarters, 4.5 pounds of wings, and all of those carcasses which still have a lot of meat on them. Those are all in the freezer to be used as soup stock later on. Now, all of this chicken, I totaled up what those birds cost me. It come up to $40.13. And I figured it up what it would have been if I would have bought the individual portions in the store to have this same weight in chicken, and it came up between $20 and $22 more. So that savings right there, as I showed, these birds were averaging $4.50 a piece. Cutting them up is effortless, and by cutting up the birds myself, I saved approximately $20 to $22, which totaled out to be 4 extra chickens. So by cutting the birds up yourself, you can put 4 more chickens in the freezer, and that's good homestead economics. I have about 3 inches of water in the pot here. I'm going to add all the parts and pieces that I want into the pot here, and I'm going to cook them thoroughly. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw in a few of these drumsticks just to have a little bit of dark meat in with the breast. Now the chicken thighs are my favorite part, so I'm going to keep those aside for either frying or for the barbecue. That ought to be enough. Nice pot of chicken right there. I'm just going to let that cook through and get some of this wrapped up for the freezer.
There are 2 different methods for canning chicken. The process I'm showing here is the hot pack method, where I boil the chicken before placing it into jars. I prefer this method because the meat is canned in the stock it was boiled in and comes out juicy and tender. This method also makes extra stock to be used later on. For the raw pack method, the jars are filled with raw chicken and no liquid is added. This method is easier because it skips the pre-cooking process and consumes less time and fuel. When the canning process is over with, the jars will be filled with liquid. This liquid was extracted from the chicken from the pressure in the canner, and I feel the meat is drier than the chicken canned with the hot pack method. There are pros and cons to both methods, so I suggest you experiment and find which method works best for you. Aside from one using cooked meat with broth and the other using raw meat with no added liquid, the rest of the process is the same.
Well, now that the chicken is all cooked, I'm just going to take out the pieces here and just pull it apart with a fork into I'm not cubing it up or anything, I'm just tearing it into chunks like that. Now I cook the chicken with the skin on because the skin will offer some really nice flavor to the stock, but I'm not going to can the skin. This way I don't have to add any bouillon or anything like that to the chicken. Okay, so I've got a nice platter of chicken here, so I'm going to go ahead and start packing the jars. I'm going to take some of this chicken stock that we created by cooking the chicken. Fill the jars right up. I'm just going to about the rim. And once my jars are filled, I just take a butter knife. I just go around the outside edge a little bit, just to force out any air bubbles that might be.
Make sure you wipe off the rim of the jar so there's no food particles that could interfere with the seal.
Now the next step after the jars are all wiped off, I have my lids here in some hot water. I just have a little magnet here on a butter knife, and that's really all that's necessary here.
After the lids are in place, screw on the rings to a nice snug fit, but don't over tighten. I have 1.5 inches of water heating in the bottom of the canner as I fill it with jars. Cover the pot and align the arrow of the cover with the arrow on the side of your canner. Now secure the lid by gradually tightening 2 clamps at a time that are opposite each other, as I'm showing here. Continue this process until the lid is secure and positioned evenly on your canner. Okay, when you start to see steam coming from the vent, let it continue steaming for approximately 10 minutes and then add the weight to it.
And these little weight here, we got 15 pounds, 10 pounds, and 5 pounds. And we're going to do the 10 pound here. And we just set the weight there with the 10 pound mark. Now once the canner reaches 10 pounds of pressure, we're going to set the timer and let this process for 75 minutes when doing pints, 90 minutes for quarts. Now the pressure should be determined by these 2 devices combined. If you're using the weight on the 10 pound setting, which we are, this weight should jiggle approximately 2 to 3 times per minute. If it's jiggling continuously, obviously your pressure is too high, and if it's not jiggling enough, your pressure is too low. If you're going by just your temperature gauge and it's set at 10 pounds and this is not jiggling at all, then chances are your gauge is inaccurate. So you want to determine your pressure by both of these devices together. We started this out on high to bring it up to pressure, but then we had to adjust the pressure to maintain this setting.
After the canner has gone through the process for a full 75 minutes, I shut off the heat and let it lose pressure without removing the weight from the steam vent. Okay, once the temperature gauge returns back to 0, go ahead and remove the little weight off of the steam vent and very carefully remove the lid from the pot. I highly suggest that you don't leave the lid on the pot for too long after the temperature gauge goes to 0, because if the temperature inside the pot cools down too much with the lid on, it will cause a very tight vacuum seal, and sometimes you'll have a hard time removing that lid from the pot. Okay, after I remove the lid from the canner, very carefully I place the jars on a towel and I allow them to cool. You will hear the lids popping as the seals are formed. After your jars have cooled, press on the center of each lid. If the lid pops down and makes a clicking noise from the pressure of your finger, your jar has not sealed and should be refrigerated and consumed right away. These jars have all sealed and can be stored in my pantry. Now that is some good eats right there, folks, I gotta tell you. Now that the seals have been formed, the rings serve no purpose and can be removed.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on canning chicken. Even if you're not intending on doing any canning yourself, hopefully you benefited from the video a little bit and at least know how to cut up a bird now. because as you can see, there was quite a savings when you're cutting up your own bird as opposed to buying the individual pieces in the grocery store. But handling all that chicken certainly got me in the mood for some wings, so I cooked up a nice batch of wings here, and I'm going to enjoy. Well, happy homesteading to you folks. Take care now.